The room was built for obedience. Not comfort. Not romance. Stone walls softened by silk drapes. Low light arranged to flatter power. The twins stood opposite her, identical in posture if not in presence. One leaned back, relaxed, as if the outcome was already his. The other watched her too closely, like a man counting exits. She stood between them in ceremonial white that felt heavier than armor. This was not a wedding chamber. It was a conclusion. She was expected to choose. Everyone in the room knew it. Servants with eyes lowered. Guards pretending not to listen. Elders who had already placed their bets. Choice meant submission. Choice meant alignment. Choice meant one man would own the future and the other would become a problem. She felt the imbalance before anyone spoke. Two empires sharing a bloodline. Two tempers restrained by tradition. One bride meant to seal rivalry with obedience. Her breath slowed. Not because she was calm. Because panic wasted air. This was the moment safety still existed. Barely. The elder officiant nodded to her. Signal. Feet. End it. The silence stretched just long enough to make someone shift their weight. The twin on the left smiled faintly, already certain. The one on the right narrowed his eyes, sensing something misaligned. She didn't look at either of them when she spoke. Her gaze stayed forward. Voice steady. No tremor. No challenge. Just clarity. I agree to marry you both. My tradition permits it. The sentence didn't land. It detonated. Sound vanished first. As if the room had inhaled and forgotten how to exhale. Someone dropped a ceremonial chain. It hit the floor too loudly. A guard's hand moved to his weapon and froze halfway. The officiant's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again without sound. This was the moment safety collapsed. The twin who had been relaxed straightened slowly, like a man realizing the floor beneath him was not solid. The other twin's reaction was subtler. His eyes sharpened. Not with anger. With calculation. He was the first to understand that this was not defiance. The officiant stammered. That is not. She turned her head just enough to look at him. Not threatening. Not pleading. Certain. It is. Her tone changed the room. Not louder. Firmer. As if she had stepped onto ground no one else could see. The elders exchanged glances they hadn't prepared for. One of them swallowed hard. The twin on the left laughed once. Short. Disbelieving. You think this is a story you control? She finally looked at him. Really looked. I think you invited me without understanding what you were agreeing to. The twin on the right lifted a hand. Not to silence her. To silence the room. Everyone obeyed without realizing they had. This was when the shift became visible. Power doesn't always move forward. Sometimes it steps sideways and everyone else loses balance. He asked quietly. Your tradition. Not a question. A request for confirmation. She nodded. Old. Binding. Recognized by 3 councils you trade with and 1 you avoid. The word trade landed badly. One elder cursed under his breath before catching himself. The laughing twin stopped smiling. The realization spread in stages. First disbelief. Then irritation. Then something colder. They were not being challenged. They were being cited. The officiant tried again, voice thinner now. This ceremony was sanctioned under. She interrupted him gently. Under agreements that defer to mine in matters of succession. Silence again. He turned to the twins for guidance and found none. The one on the right was already thinking ahead. The one on the left was still catching up, anger rising late and loud. You don't rewrite law in my house, he snapped. She met his anger without flinching. I didn't rewrite it. I arrived with it. This was when the guards stopped shifting and started listening. When the servants realized this was no longer a performance. When the elders understood that stopping her might cost more than continuing. The twin on the right spoke again, slower. If what you're saying is true, it is. Then this marriage binds us equally. She nodded once. Equally accountable. Equally visible. That word tightened something in his jaw. Visibility was a weapon. So was exposure. The twin on the left took a step forward and was stopped by a single look from his brother. The first fracture. But irreversible. The officiant backed away a half step. No one corrected him. This wasn't rebellion. It was law. And law didn't care whose empire it stood inside. The twin on the right finally smiled. Not kindly. Not warmly. With interest. You should have told us. She answered without hesitation. You should have asked. The silence that followed wasn't confusion. It was recalculation. Somewhere in the room, alliances began to shift without moving. Somewhere outside it, consequences started forming. This was no longer a question of marriage, it was a question of dominance. And as the twins exchanged a look that held no agreement, only awareness, a single truth settled heavily over the chamber. Her tradition didn't bow. Why did it outrank their empire? They didn't raise their voices. That was the first sign something had fractured. When men like them lost control, rooms usually broke with them. Furniture, faces, futures. This room stayed intact. Too intact. The damage moved inward. The twin on the left paced once. Just once. A short arc across the stone floor. Boots quiet. Hands loose at his sides like he was restraining instinct through muscle memory. His jaw was tight. His anger was loud even when his mouth stayed shut. He looked at her the way men look at problems they plan to remove. The twin on the right didn't move at all. He stayed exactly where he was, shoulders squared, gaze steady. If the left twin was reacting, the right twin was recalculating. He wasn't looking at her as a threat. He was looking at her as a variable. The elders felt it before anyone said a word. You could hear it in the way breathing changed. No one leaned in anymore. They leaned back, creating space, as if the air itself had become unstable. This was the moment the throne split. Without breaking, power doesn't break loudly. It cracks silently. The left twin stopped pacing and faced her fully. You walk into our house and rewrite the balance. His voice was sharp now. Not yelling. Cutting. Designed to draw blood without spectacle. She didn't respond immediately. That unsettled him more than defiance. When she did speak, it wasn't to him. It was to the room. I didn't come to change your balance. I came to survive it. The right twin tilted his head slightly. Just enough. Interest sharpened into focus. Survival was a language he respected. The left twin scoffed. You think law will protect you once this ceremony ends? The right twin interrupted him. Quietly. Enough. One word. No force behind it. And still the left twin stopped mid-sentence. The room noticed. The elders noticed. She noticed. This was the irreversible change. They were no longer speaking as one. The left twin turned on his brother, disbelief flashing hot. You're entertaining this. I'm listening, the right twin replied. His eyes never left her. There's a difference. Listening meant possibility. Possibility meant risk. The left twin laughed again, but this time it was brittle. You always did enjoy complications. And you always mistake disruption for insult, his brother said evenly. The space between them widened without either stepping back. Years of synchronized power suddenly out of alignment. Not opposing. Diverging. She felt it like a shift in gravity. 2 kings. 1 throne. And she was standing exactly where the pressure converged. The officiant cleared his throat and immediately regretted it. Both twins turned on him at once. For half a second they were united again. The man shrank back into silence. The left twin faced her again. His tone softened, but his words didn't. Traditions can be negotiated. She understood the offer for what it was. Erasure framed as compromise. The right twin's gaze flicked to his brother. Her tradition isn't a clause. It's a structure. Another fracture. Public. Unmistakable. The elders exchanged looks that carried calculations of loyalty and escape routes. The left twin's eyes hardened. You're choosing her over me now. The right twin answered without emotion. I'm choosing stability. She felt the weight of that word. Stability required containment. It required control. But it also required preservation. Someone who saw her value. Someone who saw her as leverage. The left twin stepped closer to her this time. Not aggressively. Intimately. Close enough that she could smell the faint metallic note of his cologne. You've put yourself in a dangerous position. She met his gaze. I was already in one. Something flickered across his face then. Not respect. Recognition. He didn't like it. The right twin moved at last. One step forward. Subtle. Enough to break the line between them. Enough to signal boundary. Threats won't solve this. The left twin smiled thinly. I'm not threatening. I'm predicting. That was the betrayal signal. Almost polite. But lethal in implication, she understood then. One twin saw her rule as an intrusion to be eliminated. The other saw it as a system to be absorbed. The ceremony had ended without anyone declaring it so. Guards shifted positions. Not toward her. Around her. Around the twins. The room reorganized itself instinctively. She realized something colder than fear settle in her chest. This marriage wasn't the danger. The divergence was. And as the twins stood separated by a few measured steps that felt like miles, one truth sharpened into certainty. One of them wanted her power. The other wanted her gone. She had learned a long time ago that silence could be louder than protest. Her tradition taught that too. Not the kind people wear like clothing. Not symbolic. Not ceremonial. This wasn't culture. It was containment. That was the truth she carried into the room and never spoke out loud. Her law didn't begin with permission. It began with consequence. A child, she was taught the rules the way other children were taught prayers. Slowly. Repeatedly. With stories of what happened when someone tried to bend them. Bloodlines were not romance. They were infrastructure. Contracts were not paper. They were memory. Consequences were not threats. They were enforcement. She stood there now with two men who believed power was inherited through violence and loyalty. They had no idea what she had already activated. The listener orientation line settled in her chest before she realized she'd thought it. This wasn't culture. It was containment. She didn't look at the twins while the elders whispered. She looked at the floor. At the seams between the stone tiles. Counting breaths. Waiting for the moment that always came after a declaration like hers. The delay. That was the dangerous part. People assumed enforcement arrived loudly. Soldiers. Guns. Messengers. They were wrong. Enforcement arrived quietly. First through absence. Then through redirection. Then through doors that no longer opened. The right twin noticed first. He felt it in the way one of the elders stopped mid-sentence. In the way a phone failed to ring. In the way a guard shifted and then hesitated as if waiting for confirmation that never came. His eyes sharpened. What did you trigger? He asked. She didn't answer immediately. Not because she was afraid. Because answering too soon always weakened the effect. Her tradition required recognition before explanation. I didn't trigger anything, she said at last. I confirmed. The left twin laughed once. Confirmed what? She raised her eyes then. Met his gaze fully. That my marriage stands under external jurisdiction. The room changed again. Not like before. This time it narrowed. Elders straightened. Guards stiffened. Names were being remembered that hadn't been spoken in years. The left twin scoffed. There is no authority above ours in this city. She nodded slightly. Not in this city. That was the exposure risk. The sentence hung there like a wire pulled tight. The right twin's jaw set. Define external. She swallowed once. Not fear. Memory. My people don't operate by borders, she said. We operate by lineage. Once a union is sealed under our law, it binds assets, territories, and protections that predate modern states. The left twin stepped closer again. You're claiming your ancestors outrank us. She shook her head. I'm saying they don't compete with you. They bypass you. That landed. The elders exchanged looks sharper now. This wasn't myth. They recognized the structure. Old networks. Older than banks. Older than governments. Quiet systems that survived empires by never standing in front of them. The right twin spoke slowly. And enforcement. She met his eyes. Doesn't come from one place. He exhaled through his nose. Controlled reaction. Names. You wouldn't recognize them, she said. But you'd feel them. The left twin turned on his brother. This is a bluff. The right twin didn't answer him. He was already testing the edges of the room with his attention. He noticed the way one elder avoided eye contact. The way another had subtly pocketed a ceremonial token meant only for witnesses. Insurance, she felt it then. The irreversible changed. IT wasn't dramatic, IT was administrative. Her marriage had activated an external authority. And that authority was already adjusting the balance beyond this room. Her phone vibrated once in her sleeve. She didn't look at it. She didn't need to. The left twin saw it anyway. His eyes snapped to her hand. Who was that? She finally allowed herself a breath. Confirmation. The right twin's voice was low. From where? She answered honestly. From everywhere that now considers me bound. Silence followed. Heavy. Calculating. The elders weren't whispering anymore. They were waiting. The left twin realized something then. His anger sharpened into something colder. If we dissolve this, he said, what happens? She held his gaze. Then the breach is recorded. The right twin's head lifted. And recorded breaches. Invite correction, she finished. The word correction sounded gentle. It wasn't, the room understood now. This wasn't a woman asking to belong. This was a system arriving through her. And the final question settled into the space between the twins like a blade waiting to fall. Who enforces her tradition, and how far do they reach? The change didn't announce itself. It arrived the way pressure does. Quiet, gradual, undeniable. By the time she noticed it, the house no longer belonged to her. Guards appeared where there had been none. Not standing in front of doors, but near them. Not watching her directly, but always close enough to hear her breathing. The corridors felt shorter. The air heavier. Every room carried the same faint awareness of being observed. She tested it with something small. She walked toward the eastern balcony just after dawn. The doors were unlocked. Nothing stopped her. But a guard shifted position before she reached the threshold. Not blocking. Just present. She stopped. He didn't speak. She turned back. That was when she understood the listener orientation line without needing to say it aloud. Safety arrived with instructions. The twins hadn't agreed on much since the chamber. But on this they were aligned. Protection. That was the word they used. Said calmly. Repeated often. A solution that sounded generous until it was applied. The right twin framed it as necessity. Until the external situation stabilizes. The left twin framed it as care. Until we know who to trust. Both meant the same thing. Her movements narrowed. She was escorted from room to room under the excuse of respect. No doors locked. No commands given. Just presence. Always presence. She could eat anywhere she wanted. As long as someone knew where she was. She could walk the gardens. As long as she didn't reach the outer wall. She could sleep alone. As long as someone remained outside the door. Her tradition warned her about this stage. The phase where power doesn't strike. It rearranges. She noticed the cameras on the second day. Embedded. Not aimed at her face, but at entrances. Exits. Angles that told stories when stitched together. She realized later that even the mirrors weren't mirrors anymore. They reflected too clearly. The right twin watched data. Screens. Patterns. The left twin watched her. Reactions. Silences. She was never alone with both. Always one. Or the other. Never together. A calculated imbalance. When she asked for privacy, the answer was immediate and calm. Of course. But privacy came scheduled. Limited. Observed. She tested again. She asked to send a message. Single line. Nothing revealing. The delay was barely noticeable. But it was there. The message sent. The confirmation didn't arrive. She said nothing. Stored the detail that night. She woke to the sound of footsteps outside her door. Not pacing. Standing. Waiting. She lay still, eyes open, and listened to the house breathe around her. It wasn't fear that settled in her chest. It was compression. She understood then that protection wasn't meant to make her feel safe. It was meant to make her predictable. The twins spoke to her separately now. The left twin questioned her tradition with a smile. You brought law into our house, he said. You can't expect us not to respond. The right twin questioned her restraint. If your authority is real, he said quietly, why haven't they intervened? She answered both the same way. With patience. With silence. With the confidence of someone who knew enforcement moved slower than fear. That unsettled them more than defiance ever could. But patience has a cost. And she began to feel it. The third day, she tried to leave the residence. She didn't announce it. She didn't rush. She simply walked toward the front gate. Guards moved, not to block her to redirect. The air quality outside isn't ideal, one said politely. We've arranged transport for later. Later never came. That was the irreversible change. She had not been restrained before. Now she was managed. She belonged to neither twin fully. And that meant she belonged to both. She felt it in the way decisions were made about her without her present. In the way meals arrived without asking. In the way her schedule filled itself. She was being contained until obedience. The twins believed this was temporary. A holding pattern. A way to keep variables controlled while they assessed her law. They were wrong. Her tradition had prepared her for this stage too. When protection tightens, resistance must become invisible. She began complying. Not submitting. Complying. She followed schedules. Ate what was given. Slept when told. She spoke less. Watched more. The guards relaxed slightly. Predictability rewarded them. They didn't see what she was doing. They didn't notice the pauses she memorized. The blind spots between camera rotations. The patterns in who stood watch at which hours. The right twin noticed something shift. Not behavior. Atmosphere. She's adapting, he said. The left twin smiled. Good. But adaptation was not surrender. It was preparation. And as the walls closed in quietly around her, one question pressed harder than all the others as she protected, or contained until obedience. She chose the moment carefully. Not during tension. Not during argument. During routine. The house had settled into its controlled rhythm. Guards predictable. Cameras humming like insects. The twins confident enough to stop pressing. That was when she spoke. They were seated in the smaller hall. Not the throne room. The place used for discussions meant to feel informal. A trap disguised as comfort. She waited until the left twin finished speaking. Until the right twin closed his tablet. Until silence arrived naturally. There's something you both misunderstand, she said. The tone mattered. Almost apologetic. Not defiant. The left twin smiled, already prepared to correct her. The right twin leaned back, attentive. She continued before either could interrupt. I didn't choose you. The air changed. The left twin laughed once, sharp and dismissive. That's not how marriage works. She met his eyes. Didn't blink. You were chosen for me. That was the moment the listener orientation line became real. This was no longer a marriage story. It was a transfer. The right twin straightened. Not angry. Alert. Chosen by who? She didn't answer immediately. Silence has weight when people are used to control. She let it stretch. By the same authority that recognizes my tradition, she said. The same one that enforces it. The left twin's smile faded. You're saying we were assigned. Vetted, she corrected gently. Evaluated. Approved. The word landed harder than insult. They had built empires on the idea that nothing moved without their consent. That power flowed outward from them. Now she was describing a process that moved around them. She stood. Not to dominate. To shift perspective. My tradition doesn't bind me to husbands, she said. It binds assets to continuity. The right twins' jaw tightened. You're calling us assets. She nodded once. So am I. That unsettled them more than rebellion ever could. Because rebellion could be crushed. This reframed them. She spoke again, each sentence measured. Your reach. Your bloodline. Your alliances. Your fractures. She looked between them. Especially your fractures. The left twin reacted first. Anger flashed. This is manipulation. She didn't deny it. No, she said. This is disclosure. The right twin said nothing. He was calculating. Running scenarios. Realizing something he hadn't allowed himself to consider. The marriage contract hadn't elevated them. It had categorized them. She continued, quieter now. If I had chosen you, you could lose me. Walk away. Break this. She gestured around the room. If you were chosen, then this house isn't a home. It's a holding structure. The left twin stood abruptly. We don't get chosen. You already were, she said. Before I arrived. The silence that followed was heavier than any threat. The right twin finally spoke. Who arranged this? There it was. The end question trying to escape early. She shook her head. Names don't help you. Why us? The left twin demanded. She met his gaze fully now. Because you're powerful enough to protect the lineage. And divided enough to be controlled. That was the irreversible change. The twins realized in the same moment that the axis had shifted. They were no longer owners negotiating terms. They were components inside a larger design. The left twin's voice dropped. If this is true, you put us at risk. She didn't argue. I warned you. The right twin exhaled slowly. If we're assets, he said, what happens if we refuse? She answered honestly. Replacement. That was the moral cost entering the room. Not violence. Not death. Erasure. The idea that their removal would be procedural. She didn't gloat. She looked almost tired. This isn't punishment. It's continuity. The left twin laughed again, but there was no humor in it. You expect us to accept this. She tilted her head. I expect you to decide which version of power you want. The kind you already know, she said softly. Or the kind that survives you. Neither spoke. The room felt smaller. Not because walls moved. Because choices narrowed. She turned toward the door. Not to leave. To end the moment. You asked earlier who protects me, she said. The answer hasn't changed. She paused. The system you just realized you're part of. She left them there. Not defeated. Reclassified. And as the door closed, one question echoed between the twins louder than any alarm. Who arranged this union, and why them? They didn't call it training. They called it preparation. That distinction mattered. She understood it the first morning they woke her before dawn. Not with urgency. With expectation. The room was different. Furniture moved. Corners cleared. Cameras adjusted to angles that no longer hid intent. That a woman waited inside. Older. Scar along her jaw. Eyes that didn't soften when she smiled. You won't be taught to survive, the woman said. You'll be taught to end situations before survival is required. No encouragement. No threat. Just a statement of scope. That was when the listener orientation line became real. Power was being installed. The sessions weren't announced. They were inserted into her days the way rules had been. Seamlessly. Inevitably. Language came first. Not fluency. Precision. She learned how dialects revealed loyalty. How pauses signaled fear. How certain words closed negotiations faster than weapons. Speak less, the instructor said. Listen longer. People expose themselves when they think you're unarmed. Then defense. Not martial arts. Reaction control. Balance. How to fall without sound. How to rise without warning. How to keep her hands visible while calculating exits. They trained her body without ever touching her pride. That was deliberate. Psychological warfare followed. The most exhausting part. They placed her in rooms with men who underestimated her. Timed how long it took before she corrected them. Counted how many mistakes she allowed before intervening. Correction too early invites challenge, she was told. Correction too late invites replacement. She began to understand. She wasn't being shaped for comfort. She was being shaped for continuity. The twins watched differently. The left twin struggled with it. He mistook training for indoctrination. Control for theft. He lingered at thresholds. Interrupted sessions under the guise of concern. The right twin observed. Quiet. Adjusting his assumptions, he noticed how her posture changed. How she stopped apologizing for space. How her eyes began to track movement automatically. One evening, after a session that left her knuckles bruised and her voice hoarse, the instructor handed her a cloth and said, "You're ready for the next phase." "What phase?" she asked. Visibility. That word tightened something inside her. She'd learned what visibility cost. The twins were called in. Not to observe. To participate. The exercise was simple. A negotiation simulation. Real names removed. Stakes implied. She was given incomplete information on purpose. The left twin pressed her early. Tested dominance. Raised his voice. She let him. She waited until he repeated himself. Then she corrected one word he'd used. Only one. The room shifted. The right twin noticed immediately. The left twin didn't realize he'd lost ground until the conversation ended with her terms accepted. "You let him talk," the right twin said afterward. "He needed to hear himself," she replied. The instructor nodded. "Authority that isn't acknowledged resents itself." That night, the guards changed formation. She noticed before anyone told her. Proximity increased. Respect replaced surveillance. No one explained it. They didn't have to. She was becoming dangerous by design. And danger demanded structure. The irreversible change came quietly. She was given access, not keys. Not passwords. Context. She was briefed on alliances she wasn't supposed to influence yet. Shown fault lines she wasn't meant to exploit yet. "Why tell me now?" she asked. "Because ignorance creates delay," the instructor said. "Delay kills leverage." That answer stayed with her. Later, alone, she confronted the twins. Not emotionally. Strategically. "How long has this been planned?" she asked. The left twin denied knowledge too quickly. The right twin didn't. "Longer than you think," he said. She studied him. "And you allowed it." He didn't answer. That was answer enough. She realized then what this training really was. Not empowerment. Not protection. Insurance. The tradition didn't require her strong to survive. IT required her strong so the system wouldn't fracture around her. And systems didn't care about comfort. They cared about continuity. As the night settled, she returned to her room. Different now. Less decoration. More function. She looked at her hands. The bruises. The steadiness. She wasn't being prepared to stand beside power. She was being prepared to replace it if necessary. That was the power cost entering the story. Because once someone is built as a contingency, they stop being moon-optional. She lay awake. One question pressed harder than fatigue. Why does her tradition require her strong? And who benefits if she ever isn't? They didn't announce it as a test. That would have given her time to prepare. They called it a dinner, a neutral venue. Public. Loud enough to hide intent. Quiet enough for eyes to travel. The twins arrived first. Power intact. Reputation doing most of the work. She entered last. That was deliberate. She felt it before she saw it. The pause. The recalculation. Chairs shifting. Conversations thinning. Visibility is war in this world. That was the listener orientation line. And it lived in her chest as she stepped forward. No veil. No attempt to soften her presence. She wore exactly what the instructor chose. Structured. Unyielding. Impossible to dismiss as decoration. The first insult came from across the table. Visual. A joke framed as tradition. She didn't respond. The second was sharper. A question designed to expose ignorance. She answered it. Briefly. Correctly. Without heat. The third came wrapped in concern. A warning about loyalty. About survival. She leaned forward then. Just enough. Survival depends on accuracy, she said. Not volume. Silence rippled. The left twin stiffened. He moved to speak. She placed her hand lightly on his wrist. Not possession. Permission. He stopped. That moment mattered more than the words. A man at the far end smiled. Not kindly. Calculating. She felt eyes settle into her posture. The way predators test fences. The challenges continued. Comment about her origin. A suggestion she didn't understand the cost of standing there. She corrected a timeline error without naming the man who made it. That restraint humiliated him more than exposure would have. Laughter followed. Easy. Uncontrolled. She didn't smile, she let the room feel it. The right twin watched her like a variable becoming constant. He saw how she absorbed pressure without reacting to it. How she let others overextend, then closed space with one sentence. The turning point came when a rival leader stood. Toast raised. Words sweet. Meaning poisoned. That he welcomed her publicly. As a curiosity, weakness. She stood before either twin could intervene. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't need to. Curiosity ends when questions are answered, she said. Weakness ends when assumptions fail. She met his gaze. Held it. Didn't blink. Which are you here for? The room stopped breathing. The man laughed too quickly. Sat down too fast. That was the win. She felt it land. Not applause. Not approval. The shift. Guards adjusted their stance. Phones lowered. The atmosphere recalibrated around her presence. And that was the irreversible change. She had won publicly. And public victories attract witnesses. She noticed the man near the exit then. Not reacting. Recording nothing. Memorizing everything. He didn't look impressed. He looked satisfied. That scared her more than hostility. The dinner ended without ceremony. No confrontation. No blood. That was worse. In the car, the left twin finally spoke. You didn't have to provoke them. She turned to him. I didn't provoke them. I removed doubt. The right twin said nothing. His jaw was tight. That silence meant consequence. Back at the house, security protocols changed again. Subtle. Increased layers. Names whispered that hadn't been used before. The instructor appeared without announcement. Someone marked you tonight, she said. I know, she replied. Good, the woman said. That means it worked. What worked? She was handed a file. Incomplete. The part where they stop wondering if you're real. Sleep didn't come easily. She replayed the faces. Laughter. The one man who didn't react, she understood now. The public test wasn't about dominance, it was about identification. She'd been placed in a room to see who recalculated. And recalculation was the first step toward elimination or recruitment. As dawn crept in, she stood at the window. Guards visible. City waking, she felt stronger. Sharper. And more exposed than ever. She had crossed from protected asset to visible threat. And someone out there had seen her strength and marked her. The only question left was whether they intended to use it or erase it. Night settled heavier after the dinner. Not quieter, heavier. The house adjusted around the imbalance before anyone spoke. Security rotations changed without explanation. The right twin dismissed 2 guards and replaced them with men who answered only to him. She noticed because she was trained to. The left twin noticed because he felt excluded. They didn't argue, that was new. She was escorted to the east wing instead of her usual rooms. No explanation. Just a subtle redirection of power. When the door closed behind her, she understood the test wasn't over. It had moved indoors. When monsters feel, cities burn. That truth surfaced not as fear but as pressure. She sensed him before he knocked. The right twin never knocked. He entered like a decision already made. His composure was intact. His voice wasn't. You shouldn't have done that tonight, he said. not accusation. Observation. You brought eyes, she replied. I brought leverage, he said. You activated it. Silence stretched. He crossed the room slowly, like someone pacing a perimeter rather than approaching a person. Do you know what it feels like, he said, to rule with someone who has never doubted you? She watched him carefully. And then suddenly realized doubt doesn't weaken you. It sharpens you. That was the crack. He sat across from her. Not beside. Not above. I haven't slept since the wedding, he said. Not from fear. From noise. She didn't interrupt. Training said let men speak when they start confessing without permission. Every room is louder now, he continued. Every choice feels observed. She tilted her head. That's awareness. He shook his head once. No, it's you. The admission landed hard. He stood abruptly, pacing. You stand there and the rules bend, he said. Not because you force them. Because they want to. She felt the shift then. The emotional ignition. The dangerous one. He stopped in front of her. Close enough that his presence crowded her breath. My brother sees strategy, he said quietly. I see loss. She met his eyes. Didn't retreat. Didn't advance. Loss of what? His jaw tightened. Control. That word mattered. She understood now. This wasn't affection. It was destabilization. He leaned in. Stopped himself before contact. You don't belong to either of us, he said. But you're changing the balance. That was the betrayal signal. Not overt. Implied. The door opened behind him. The left twin didn't announce himself. He never did when anger was involved. He took in the distance between them. The tension. The unspoken alignment. Interesting, he said. I leave for an hour and the house rearranges itself. The right twin turned. Calm restored too quickly. She needed clarity, he said. She doesn't need you alone for that, the left twin replied. Her pulse stayed steady. Her instincts didn't. This was the moment where jealousy ignited. Not romantic. Territorial. The left twin looked at her. Did he tell you why he can't sleep? She didn't answer. He smiled thinly. He never could handle unpredictability. The right twin's hand flexed at his side. Careful, he warned. Or what? The air thickened. She stood then, not to intervene, to be seen. I didn't ask for either of you to feel anything, she said. But I won't pretend I don't notice when the ground shifts. Both men looked at her now. She addressed them evenly. Your bond is the most dangerous thing in this room, she said. And it's cracking. The left twin laughed once. You think you can diagnose us? She shook her head. No. I think I triggered something that was already unstable. Silence followed. He stepped closer to her. Not threatening. Evaluating. If one of us falls, he said softly. Who do you think survives? The right twin answered before she could. The one willing to bleed first. That answer changed everything. The left twin turned slowly. You offering. The right twin met his gaze. Didn't look away. She felt it then. The irreversible change. The emotional imbalance was no longer private. It had a witness. That made it lethal. Security alarms chimed distantly. Not urgent. Cautionary. Someone else was listening. The left twin smiled again. Be careful, he said to her. You're standing between us now. She held his gaze. I was always between you, she said. You just didn't notice. He left without another word. The right twin stayed. Too long. He exhaled slowly. If it comes to it, he said, I won't hesitate. She studied him. Which one of you are you talking about? He didn't answer. That silence was the cliff. She understood the truth as he turned away. Only one of them would survive this shift. And the first sacrifice wouldn't be made for power. It would be made for feeling. The question was no longer if betrayal would happen. It was which twin would sacrifice the other first. The first death didn't arrive with noise. It arrived with absence. One chair empty at breakfast. A seat that had always been filled by a man who never spoke unless spoken to. The staff moved around it without comment, and no one asked where he was. That was the rule. When protection moves, questions die first. She noticed because she was trained to. Not formally. By pressure, by repetition, by watching who disappeared and who didn't. The right twin didn't come down that morning. The left twin did. He ate calmly. Precisely, he didn't look at her until halfway through the meal. It started, he said. She didn't ask what. You should eat, he added. Days like this drain you. Listener orientation line settled into her chest, heavy and undeniable. Protection always leaves bodies behind. The second death was cleaner, a driver who took the long route once too often, a phone that stopped answering, no blood, no sirens. Just a schedule that adjusted itself. She felt it tightening around her like an invisible net. Every movement now had consequence, not potential, confirmed. She was called upstairs before dusk. The right twin stood at the window. Back to the room. The city below glimmered like a living thing. I told him not to move yet, he said. He moved, she replied. He wanted to prove a point. The right twin turned slowly. And did he? She considered the question. To himself? Maybe. He nodded once. Then he paid for it. That was the moral collapse, not the killing. The calm agreement that it was necessary. She felt something shift inside her. Not fear, acceptance. That scared her more. Security tightened again. She was escorted now by men whose names she didn't know. That was deliberate. Names create attachments. Attachments complicate orders. They passed a hallway she had never walked before. She smelled antiseptic metal. Cold air. A room opened. A body lay covered. Not displayed. Documented. The left twin stood beside it. His expression was unreadable. This is what interference looks like, he said. She didn't flinch. Whose? She asked. Does it matter? He replied. She met his gaze. It matters to me. He studied her for a long moment. Then pulled back the sheet just enough she recognized the shoes first. The man had once bowed to her after the public test. Not in submission, an acknowledgement. She inhaled slowly. He spoke, the left twin said. To the wrong person. She closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, something had settled. This is because of me, she said. Not a question, not guilt, a statement. The left twin didn't deny it. Because of alignment, he corrected. Not presence. That distinction was important. He stepped closer. You're not collateral, he said. You're cause. The word branded itself into her. She was escorted back before she could respond. The house was quieter now, not calm. Alert, the kind of silence that comes before decisions. The right twin found her later that night. He didn't touch her. It won't stop, he said. I know, she replied. Once blood is paid, he continued. It sets a price. She looked at him. On me. He hesitated. That hesitation answered her. The next morning, the name change arrived, not ceremonially. Administratively. Documents slid across a table, signatures waiting. The left twin stood behind the chair. The right twin watched her face. This protects you, the left twin said. She picked up the pen. This marks me, she replied. Both can be true, he answered. She signed. The ink dried faster than she expected. Irreversible change settled in. She was no longer adjacent. She was inside, the city. Responded immediately. Invites stopped arriving. Gazes lingered longer. People measured their words when she entered a room. She felt it in how doors opened faster and closed harder. The first time she heard her name spoken with airs, it wasn't affectionate. It was a warning. She stood alone on the balcony that night. The city breathed below her. She realized something then. Not sorrow, not regret, clarity. Love wasn't the sharpest weapon here. Visibility wasn't either. Alignment was. Once claimed you. Didn't have to be defended. You were enforced. She pressed her hand against the glass, inside. Footsteps approached. She didn't turn. She already knew. The question wasn't whether she was loved. The question carved itself deeper. Is love just another weapon here? By morning the house smelled different. Cleaner. Emptier. The kind of clean that comes after something has been removed rather than fixed. She noticed it as soon as she opened her eyes. The air no longer carried tension. It carried completion. Threats were gone, not quieted. Erased. She dressed without assistance for the first time in days, no guards at the door, no voice reminding her of the schedule. That absence felt heavier than presence ever had. She walked the corridor slowly, listened. The house breathed evenly now, stable. That was the signal. IT was over. Downstairs the left twin stood alone at the long table. Breakfast untouched, a tablet beside his hand. He didn't look up when she entered. "It's finished," he said. "All of it?" she asked. "Everything that could reach you?" He replied. "What about the things that couldn't?" He paused, then smiled faintly. "Those were never threats." She took a seat. The chair felt different. IT always would. The right twin joined them moments later. He carried nothing, no phone, no folder. His hands were empty. That meant decisions had already been made. "There won't be any more movement," he said. "The city's calm." She nodded. Calm didn't mean safe. IT meant resolved. She waited. There was always a final thing, a document, a signature, a word. The left twin slid a single envelope across the table. She didn't open it yet. "What is it?" she asked. "Closure," he said. She broke the seal slowly. Inside was a single page, no letterhead, no seal, just confirmation. The last remaining clause from her tradition, invalidated, by mutual authority, by blood, by consent. She felt the weight of it before she finished reading. This was the final irreversible act, not the deaths, not the name change. The option to leave had existed only on paper. Now even that was gone. She folded the page carefully. She didn't tear it, she didn't protest. "Who approved this?" she asked. "You did," the right twin replied. She looked up. "When?" "The moment you stayed," he said. "The moment you didn't run when you still could." Listener orientation line pressed into the silence. Undeniable silence returned heavier than fear. She stood. The chair didn't scrape, that felt intentional. "I want to walk," she said, no question. The right twin gestured toward the doors. No guards followed her. The grounds were quiet. Morning light cut across stone paths. She breathed deeply. Not relief, not grief, adjustment. That was the emotion that remained. Adaptation had replaced resistance. She stopped near the edge of the property. The city was visible from here. Orderly. Unaware. She realized something then that no one out there knew what had ended. They only felt the absence of instability. That was how systems survived. They erased evidence and called it peace. When she returned inside, the house resumed its rhythm. Staff moved. Phones rang softly. The twins separated. Each pulled back into their roles. She stood alone in the center of it. All aligned. All contained. She touched the ring on her finger. IT felt lighter today. That was the danger. IT would be easy to mistake that for freedom. She went to the room that had once been hers alone. IT no longer was. There were no locks. She didn't need them now. She sat at the edge of the bed and let the quiet settle. This was the ending, not dramatic, not loud. Just complete, she understood now. She hadn't married two men. She had married infrastructure, hierarchy, continuity, a system designed to absorb threats by consuming choices. Systems didn't hate, systems didn't love. Systems adapted. And once they adapted to you, they never let you go. She lay back and stared at the ceiling. No tears came. They were unnecessary. She had survived, that was true. But survival wasn't the opposite of captivity. IT was proof that captivity had succeeded. Outside, the city moved on. Inside, everything was exactly where it was supposed to be. She closed her eyes and accepted the final echo. She didn't marry two men. She married a system. And systems don't let go.